Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to call to order our school committee meeting, Milton School Committee for September 4th, 2024, first meeting of the new school year having begun. So it's great to see you all, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does anyone have any changes to our agenda tonight? Will we approve it? Okay. So the first item will be our public comment time. We have no one here in person for public comment. Do we have anybody online who's attending for this purpose? If so, can you raise your hand, please?
And we have no attendees.
Okay. Well, in that case.
Oh. They hadn't started the recording. I don't know if that was on me or on them. Oh. So give it 1 second because now people might be admitted. Is that my fault? Okay, now. Okay.
Do we start over the call to order and everything?
Well,
Okay.
I think technically it's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
Maybe just do the.
Okay, sorry everybody. All right, so for anybody just joining us, thank you for joining. It's our school committee meeting for September 4th. We are up to public comment in our agenda for this evening. Public comment is when we set aside up to 15 minutes for members of the community to come and share perspectives with us for up to 3 minutes per speaker. We have no one in person for public comment this evening, but if you are attending online and would like to speak, can you please raise your hand at this time?
Mr. Joe Henning. Remote.
Okay. All right, so we have a speaker. Sorry, let me just pull it. And we'll go ahead and elevate you.
Okay.
You're here, sorry. Ready? Mr. Johanning, can you hear us?
Sorry, we can't hear you, sir.
Yes.
Rock and roll. Hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. But wait, one moment. We may have an echo. Apologies. Hold on while we figure this out.
I'm not gonna do this without that guy.
Does someone else have something open here?
I can just turn off the volume when he's talking and then turn it back on when he's not. I don't know. Well, let him go and then we'll be quiet while he talks.
All right.
Is there still an echo?
Yes. Yes, but is it fixed?
This is, I think, as good as it's going to be.
Mark, can you mute that?
It is muted. This one's muted. It's hearing us obviously and him. Which is all the sound from the webinar is coming through from the computer. So it's not that it's hearing me through the computer. computers projecting the full meeting.
Sorry, just a second, folks. I'm trying to figure this out.
Thank you.
No. I don't know.
All right, can we give it a try?
Right now,
Yes.
hear me? Is there an echo?
One more time.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Thanks, so sorry. Thanks for your patience.
sure. 23 Parkwood Drive in Milton. The reason why I wanted to speak tonight was that I wanted to go back to the original presentation for the school committee back in 2019 when the presentation was made about the need for a new school. So I requested from school administration the presentation. After I reviewed the presentation, I asked if there was a report behind the presentation where I could get the sources of the data used in coming up with the need for 26 additional classrooms. And I was told that there was no presentation, that there was no report. I was told that the only thing that had been requested was the presentation itself. And the firm that prepared the presentation was an architectural firm who works on schools. So I was very concerned about how valid the presentation, the 2019 presentation was. And then I went to the select board meeting on the 29th, and Cindy Christensen presented her analysis of that original 2019 presentation. And she indicated that she didn't see the need for 26 additional classrooms. And the reason why I'm talking is not to say she's right or she's wrong, that the Christensen-Walsh report is the final word. But what I am saying is, I think we all need to work with Cindy Christensen and Megan Walsh to fine-tune the report so that we're all working with one set of data. I think the idea of everybody, separating into camps and presenting different data to voters makes a very confusing situation. And I'm urging everyone to communicate with Christensen Walsh and feed data to them that you think they might have overlooked or data that they might need, so that we can have one set of data and we can all work together toward one goal. whether it's 5 classrooms or 26, it doesn't really matter. I think the best way to resolve the current crowding crisis, the crowding crisis that everybody seems to be talking about, is to do it now in a more economical fashion, facility by facility. That's just my thought. But we do need to have one set of data that we can rely on to know how many classrooms is it that we really need. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming to share that perspective with us. Appreciate it. Thanks again for your patience. Okay. Is anybody else here looking to participate in public comment? If so, can you please raise your hand online? All right. Okay. Great, thank you again. We will be moving into the superintendent's report now, which is a big, important one.
Yeah.
Started the new school year since our last meeting, so congratulations, and we'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. Do you want to pull up the presentation? In 8 seconds, please. So I just wanted to show this picture, if you look behind you, of some of our new staff members who we welcomed this year. We had 28 new staff that went through our new staff orientation. I mentioned that they were kind of in the middle of their orientation at the time of our last meeting. And it was great to welcome them at our opening day. Our opening day last week was, I think, really fun, informative. It was really important too. I had shared in our last meeting about the finishing touches we were putting on the implementation plan, which I shared with all of you, and our action plan, which I'll talk about later on in my report. And it was the majority of the time we spent with staff in the morning was talking about the implementation plan and talking about how we would be working through this year to build out all those different action steps that we've identified in that year one action plan. So it was a long time coming, all of the work we did last year, all the analysis and everything. And I think it was received well. We did get feedback. We provided a Google form after everyone had a chance to review it. We put people, it's hard to break people up in the auditorium because the seating is just not conducive to that. But we had groups of 3 that met and looked through it and reflected on just kind of like what they both saw in the plan, how they saw themselves in the plan, and what kinds of things should we be thinking about as we put together the different action teams that will be leading this work. So I'll leave it at that because I'm going to start digging into that. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I think one of the things I've seen as we've started the year is and I'm comparing this to last year, I'm seeing us as an organization start to change. I'm seeing more coordination between schools. I definitely saw that, as I mentioned, during the summer and working with all of our leaders. That is continuing to take shape. Some of our new central office leaders are a big part of that happening. So I'm really grateful for the folks that are part of that central office team who are helping to guide this work and structure it. I provided a document for enrollment, so that's one of the things I wanted to share in terms of getting started and where we are in terms of our numbers. So if you want to open that document, it's in your folder. This is just a quick kind of simple comparison from last year to this year, but you can see we had talked about the K spike, the higher number of K students this year. And we're currently at, I believe it's 361 in here. And this is not final, so our final numbers will be October. This is just kind of like a point in time snapshot of enrollment. You can see that due to classes moving up and coming in, that large 6th grade class at Pierce went from 959 to 1059. And our total in district from 4317 to 4430. We did at the 11th hour, we got our wall in at Cunningham and Collycott, which was great. There's if you go to any kind of presentation at Pierce in the library, there's a wall now. Some of you were part of a meeting where we were trying to have a meeting with 30 people in that library, and then there was a class going on next door. And the teacher is very appreciative of that wall now, and she's been in there for like 10 years, so she had gotten used to it, but now she realizes how great it is to have that kind of a classroom that's not open.
So there are walls in the Cunningham Library now?
Yeah, for that new classroom, the one over, if you're looking out of the windows over to the right, and that's where, I think there was a classroom there a few years ago. It was a staff room last year.
Yep.
So the staff room has now moved up to the 4th floor. So there's a lot of cleaning that happened on the 4th floor, and we'll be sharing more about that work in the coming meetings, the next couple meetings, as we unpack. The architects are working on some final numbers of what that will cost, so we'll be bringing that back to all of you and talking about next steps for that. Any questions about enrollment? Yeah.
So for the middle school, I feel like this was brought up somewhere before. So I think like 6th and 7th grade, depending on the schools, is when you'll oftentimes see migration out.
Yeah.
Was this year, were there fewer students leaving for private school? Did you find, or are there more people coming in the district?
It was
just a combination?
It was mostly a larger class. It was
Okay.
less of fewer kids. That number has maintained, like pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID, has been fairly steady,
Yeah.
which was surprising. I looked at that early last year because I was thinking we would see a lot more dips and peaks.
Well, it's the year of the dragon when that class was born. My son is one of them. And everyone wants to have a dragon baby.
Oh.
That may be why.
That could be it.
So are these like the most up-to-date numbers
Yeah.
as of now?
Yeah.
To your point, if you just count all the 5th grade,
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And like I said, these numbers will change slightly up or down, or they haven't come off. These are often power schools, so if the person in charge of this hasn't gone in like in the last couple of days, their movement. So it will move a little bit, but this is like kind of today point in time.
And then outside of, because like obviously it's 100 extra kids at Pierce, is that like classroom sufficient in terms of like accommodating? Like what have we done, I guess, in terms of space?
So there was there wasn't the need to create more space, but there was a need to switch the schedules around so that people were moving in and out of classrooms. Instead of, if you have a prep period as a teacher, instead of having that classroom be open, someone is coming into your classroom to teach a class. So there's like no open space at any time. It's just all kind of scheduled out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then where does prep take place? Like if teachers
Someone would go to like the department room for their prep, or the library, or somewhere. Yeah. And that is actually a topic of conversation for as we've gone around. Last year, we were doing site visits for a school building committee. Different schools are approaching that in different ways in terms of a classroom where a teacher has their own classroom versus having classrooms that are like a university style,
Yeah.
where you kind of go in, bring your stuff in, grab your laptop, and go back out.
But that kind of like teacher running from classroom does not necessarily work in elementary schools, right? Because students have
lot
to be in one place, right? With safety issues and accommodations and just regular teaching in general. So the overcrowded issue still does not solve, even you think about creative ideas like that in middle school. It doesn't work in elementary school. So I just want to point that out to whoever listening.
Well, and as an example, one of the classes that was so one of the reasons we created the classroom in Collycott was because Collycott Cunningham Library was because Glover had the bubble class that went to Pierce. So they had it was going to be at Glover, but all the students were from East Milton. So we decided that it made sense to make the classroom there as opposed to over in Glover. So because of that, there's an art room now this year
Okay,
At Glover.
at Glover,
good.
which had been taken. And so it was art on the cart moving around.
Yeah.
And that's happened in a lot of schools where,
How
no
about
one
the
designs
music?
art to be not in one room, just given the materials needed.
How about the music room in Glover? I remember it was on stage before.
Yeah, I think music may be using part of the art room now, and still that we didn't get two spaces back, just one.
Oh,
And just building on your point, but even for the middle school, that we know from our tours that we lack adequate space for the teachers to go have like a professional workspace on their prep. So that shouldn't go without saying either, that
Or meetings. Yeah.
yeah, like
Having a meeting, yeah.
it's really it's good to be able to, do as much as we can within the walls of the buildings that we have. That's what we've been doing, and this is an extension of that, but it's squeezing the ability for our professionals to do their work. So that's a problem.
No, without a doubt. So I'm going to keep going with my.
I have just
Yes.
a couple things on enrollment,
Yeah.
just from historical perspective beyond just the last 2 years, as I was going through the DESI profiles. So the K2 enrollment of 361, it's the third highest in the last 10 years. It's as far back as I went, and then from there it starts actually just going down. So I think it's the third highest ever, the highest since 2020, which was seen as a blip year because that overall enrollment increase. Overall enrollment at 4,430 is the second largest ever, second only to 2020, which was 4,431. That was the highest of all time. And that's, again, as far back as I can go in DESI. But we know enrollment has only increased. So just from a historical context, it's not just that it's bigger than last year, it's that it is bigger than it has been. And our incoming kindergarten class is not currently the biggest of all time, but one of the three highest, and it's only a couple off from being second. So just as we think about the space issues, they unfortunately persist. It'd be nice if these cohorts got smaller, but they are not.
Yeah. So wanted to talk a little bit, give an update on community schools. Is something that we talked about a lot last year, and something that we talked about, I think, going into the summer. Just a quick update on where we are with the work that we have done over the spring and summer. So on the staffing side, we have 28 new staff members. We have 16 staff members that left at the end of 23-24. So we hired an additional 12 staff members. And you probably all remember we
Does that
increased.
include the high school students? Sorry. Or are these the full-time staff? I mean, not full-time staff, but
believe
Adult
do you know
leaders.
if this
Adult
is-
leaders, sorry, thank you.
I don't know if it includes the high school students. I believe it excludes them.
Yeah.
I think it
can-
excludes them because we have enough high school students, so that number has stayed static.
Okay.
We can't really use more high school students.
Right, okay.
Mhm.
Thanks,
So,
sorry.
Yeah, I believe that's. In terms of early school, there's no wait list currently for early school care. After school, at each school, Collycott, there are 168 students on the 2-day, 3-day, or 5-day option. So this year is the return to, previously there was an option for 2 days or 3 days a week. This year we went back to that to try to basically create more slots. So
Yep.
some people have moved into a 2-day slot. They want a 5, but they're in 2, which is helpful, but not exactly what they need. 168 students. Total enrollment on any given day is about 150 students. It's an increase of 20 students from last year, which had a total enrollment of 130. There are currently 28 students on the wait list, 20 of which are enrolled in a 2 or 3-day option. Cunningham, 173 students are enrolled, and it's an increase of a similar increase of 20 students from last year, which had a total daily enrollment of 130. Cunningham has 49 students on the wait list, 16 of which are enrolled in the 2 or 3-day option. Glover has 170 students and 148 on any given day. It's an increase of 18 students from last year. And 39 students are on the wait list, 7 of which are enrolled in 2 or 3-day. And then Tucker has 105 students enrolled with 125 on any given day. And it's an increase of 27 students from last year, which had a daily enrollment of 98 students, and there is no wait list at Tucker. And an update is being sent to families on the wait list the week of September 16th. So
Does hiring continue?
Yeah, I mean, the hiring is open and continues. Do you have any other updates on that from your conversations with
No,
many schools? Okay.
no, I think that covers it.
So how many more total how many more students will you be able to accommodate throughout all the schools?
Oh, it's about 80
80.
or so.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's a move in the right direction, which
Yeah.
is great. I think, now that the year has started, we need to meet and look at this had an impact, but not a total impact. What are the next things that we need to think about doing to shift or change? And, we set our salaries higher than our competitors. So I think we need to look at that. Is there somewhere where we still need to look at more deeply? Is there a position that we could shift slightly or add things to it, or find ways to make it just kind of more attractive for applicants?
Couple similar to that, just because you threw a lot of numbers out there. Just trying to keep track. So how many total kids are on the wait list that aren't under, I guess you'd say under enrolled, like aren't enrolled at all, aren't getting any services?
That aren't enrolled in 2 or 3 days?
Yeah, aren't getting any services.
That's 40.
73.
Okay.
73 on a wait list with nothing.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Do we know how that compares to last year at this time?
It was a lot higher. Well, I mean, it was last year. Just the wait list was, we're I guess I don't have that. I don't have the data from last year to know.
Yeah, I just think from a messaging perspective, I think the point of like we are serving 80 more students is a great story. I think we've been able to shrink the wait list by this many families, this many students would be great to tell. It's still tough for the families who don't get in. I know a couple, I think there's also the piece of that we should recognize is that like there are people who aren't on the wait list anymore because they declined a spot because they didn't get in early and had to figure out something else.
For sure.
And so like that those wait lists would be longer if we had the spots open from the beginning, probably.
I think
But-
around that messaging too, it's important to let families know when it feels like there's just no movement. Because I think some families do sort of kind of hold on to that
Yeah.
and try to make something work. But I think it's important to know that when there hasn't been any movement, that chances are you're not going to get in. And so for families to come up with alternative plans as needed.
And we plan to come back to do a presentation on all this later. This is just a quick update, kind of start of school to let you all know where we are.
And when we spoke about it earlier, I spoke with the director of the program, and just in talking about the communication to the families that are on the wait list, certainly with the start of the school year, being able to get that initial enrollment in and letting that settle, making sure that we're doing kind of continuous checks on the wait list, how can we accommodate our families on a monthly basis, and then in the messaging to the families, letting them know that if they have any questions specific to their individual concerns, that they can certainly reach out and we'd be able to talk to them about where they are on the wait list, just being realistic about, we know that these families need to make accommodations for their students after school, and we want to be able to provide them enough time and to be able to plan in order to do so. And so any of the families should feel free to reach out to the director at any point in time, and we can provide that information to them.
Another just topic at the start of the year, something that we were talking a lot about last year at this time was transportation. So you all know we added a bus mid-year. That has helped. We still do have students on the wait list. We registered 1,367 students by the June 30 deadline. At that point, we had 31 Pierce and high school students on a wait list. We've had a number of students apply after the deadline, and we currently have 116 is the total number now on the wait list. And last year we had 145 on the wait list. So I think this will be a topic for our budget talks to talk about whether we want to invest in meeting full need. The fees that we collect are a portion of the cost of a bus. What was the delta? Do you remember? I know a bus is about 90.
The bus is about 90, and we collect about $290,000 for the year. And so overall, we're able to use that $290,000 to offset the overall expense of transportation. But transportation runs, it will be over $1 million this year for Yellow Bus. So it's only a portion.
As far as I understand, the history of Milton has been, because the state law is elementary and not secondary, that it's always been a kind of optional type of service for secondary. Some districts don't approach it that way, so I do think it's something that we should talk about collectively and make a decision about.
And how many people, I know we added the bus last year, how many people students does that support right now, that extra bus?
So the buses at the secondary level are all at capacity. And so for middle school, high school students, the recommendation is the 2 students per seat. And so I believe we have 50 students on each one of the buses at the secondary level. And we're at total capacity at the secondary level. We are working with the bus company. It's similar to community schools where we'll continue to monitor the enrollment on the bus. So if there's any shifts, making sure that we're accommodating those families that are on the wait list. Because I've talked to several families that do have middle schoolers that transportation is a concern for them. And so just letting them know that we're gonna continue to make sure we're doing our bus counts, checking our capacity, see if there's any students that aren't riding that may have been registered, and trying to accommodate as many students as we possibly can on our existing fleet, while of course looking at if there's any ways for us to increase our efficiencies and make any accommodations to try to be able to provide transportation to as many students as we can.
So given what the wait list was this time last year before we added the bus, but now we have this still significant wait list, I mean, do we just have more students seeking transportation obviously this year than in the previous year?
We also have 100 more kids across those two schools.
Yeah. Because the biggest grade is moving to a middle school now. And many of them are riding on the bus, including my son.
So right now, this would be 3 additional buses.
Oh, wow.
To fit the
If
kids.
we were
Okay.
able-
Yeah.
if
Okay.
we were
Okay. No, that's really good to know that what that number would be, just so we can prepare for it.
be able to plan for it.
Do we prioritize? I'm sorry.
No, I just thinking in terms of your point, right, that not every district approaches it the way that we do. And I think if we factor in the fact that we don't have great public transportation, right, there are other districts where you can rely on that.
We have a trolley.
But for us, we can't do that. Maybe start a trolley system that takes you all around town. That's a good idea. Then all of us can
Expand the
use it.
trolley.
But no, it just becomes even more of a case for making sure that we look at it from a different perspective and make the effort to be able to provide that. But that, of course, requires greater investment.
For sure.
Do we have a sense, I mean, has there been like an audit done or kind of a comparison of what other districts are doing and how many, to your point that different districts do it different ways, is that information that's been pulled together and looked at from just to see how other districts handle it?
I haven't done that yet, but I can say just from my experience in working in other districts, there's definitely areas that I think we can look into, just opportunities for maybe doing things a little bit differently. And certainly there's different companies that I've utilized in other districts that would be able to come in and if we wanted to do a transportation audit or have anyone assist us and look at the efficiencies of the routes, the different opportunities, even if we wanted to do an analysis on the efficiency or cost savings of operating a fleet versus there's just a whole host of things that we could look at. We do partner with First Student right now, and I will say that they have been really wonderful in addressing some of the issues and the concerns that have come up so far this school year, because we are just working through kind of those opening day issues and hiccups that we've experienced. But I do think that that's some of the work that I plan on doing this year, is just kind of looking at what we're doing here, what we're currently doing, and how can we potentially improve that isn't necessarily just adding another bus, but that could have a more positive impact on either the student's experience, the length of the ride, kind of the overall transportation program. So great.
2 questions. Do we do any prioritization of peer students over high school students? Is that like by policy or just by design?
So I believe we will look at the distance to the school, and it's typically for the middle school students first. I would have to confirm that, but I believe that a lot of the questions have been more geared towards the middle school. And I know that that's typically how the wait list is situated, that we try to accommodate we are accommodating the students that are further away from the school, and then we kind of work backwards. But I can definitely confirm that. I haven't heard as much feedback about the high school, but
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering, like, if we have a high schooler who lives further away and the middle schooler who lives closer, both on the wait list, how do we prioritize? Is it just who applied first? Is it, again, distance? Is it age? Over distance? That's one of the things. So I'm not sure what our policy should be on that, if we have one or not, but just that was a question mark. I think the other thing that I think of is, from working with buses, is like bus assignment numbers are different than ridership numbers, right? And so like getting ridership data on, you got 50 kids assigned, how many kids are actually riding the bus home? I can especially see that at the high school with how many after school events, electives, sport, all the things that happen at a high school. That, like, do you actually have somebody who's on the bus because it's a nice option to have for a family, but they're not utilizing it consistently, and is there a way to say, like, actually we want to prioritize this for a family that does need it more consistently, that is in a tougher spot as it relates to transportation. So those are thoughts.
Well, and that can free up 80 slots across the fleet. If you look at averages over time, and then you understand, like, over a month-long period, the students might not all be the same, but the 50 capacity bus never crests 40 or something. So then you can add.
And then you could create a ridership policy that says, hey, you don't ride the bus, but so often, again, then you need attendance taken on the bus, right? And I'm not sure what first students' role in that is, or our staff's role in that is, and stuff like that. But
we can ask them to do rider counts, and that's something that I was planning on doing kind of after we've just had the routes established and we're more comfortable in operating the routes. Just asking them if they, especially at the secondary level, okay, let us know how many students are actually physically getting on the bus. We can look at it over multiple weeks and then take an average. I know at the secondary level, we may have some students at the high school that start driving and then could potentially be driving a sibling. So there's just going to be those fluctuations across the board. So just making sure that, to your point, that we're mindful of them and that we continue. We don't want the wait list to just, the families feel like they're just going to sit on the wait list and not have an opportunity to ride. So just continuously trying to add as many students as we can.
And one of the things that I'll be talking about the implementation plan soon, and 3.4 is our strategic priority is kind of all the other systems that we are identifying that we need to retool, and transportation is absolutely one of them that Katie kind of took off sprinting with, just because she has to, because it's a problem to fix, and so she's fixing it, which is awesome. So we had a little glitch with our bus passes, and Katie's got a plan for that for next year to not have the bus passes in the same way, and obviate the need for sending it out, people getting it, and being sure, do I have it to ride it? So anyway, excited to make all these things just work better. Makes a big difference. So do you want to bring the presentation back up?
Yep.
You're doing a great job, by the way.
Yeah. I would have totally messed this up like 5 times by now. Our stipend. Doing a great job.
I don't know if this is like, he's like a staff member and
Love it.
a conflict of interest or something. But. Okay, so implementation plan, I shared with all of you. Hopefully you had a chance to look through it and get to know it a little bit. So you can go to the next slide. So here's the cover. Just for those that are kind of watching and don't know where this came from. This is the culmination of an entire year of listening and learning in the first part of the fall last year, compiling all of that, everything we heard, survey data, and an analysis of all of our key systems in the district, which was then put into a priority report, which you can find on our website. That priority report was then the basis for the development of the implementation plan. So the structure of the plan is the same as the priority report, with our 3 priority areas: academic excellence, climate, culture, and well-being, and operations. So our first priority area, academic excellence, we identified 3 different strategic priorities. The strategic priorities are the point 1, point 2, point 3. Number 1.1, implement a shared instructional framework for Milton Public Schools that operationalize shared beliefs and our collective vision of highly effective teaching and learning. We've coupled that with 1.3. And when I talk about the action plan momentarily, I'll talk a little bit about that. But we're going to have one group working on both 1.1 and 1.3 together. The second thing is a multi-tiered system of support. I shared last year in updates to the school committee how resoundingly the staff resonated with this work and the need for this work. As we talk about closing the opportunity gap, as we talk about having every student excel to the highest level that they can, we need to have a system of instruction that is clear, that we know when we need to intervene, how we do that, and we need to all be coordinated and understand how that system operates. So that is academic excellence. Want to go down to the next one? So climate, culture, and well-being. 2.1 is sustaining an inclusive and collaborative organizational culture that fosters continuous improvement in professional learning and practice. This is kind of our social emotional learning strategic priority. We've had a lot of really impassioned work in social emotional learning over the last years. You all know that it was a central point of the strategic plan as well, is a central core of the strategic plan. This work is going to be bringing together everything that's currently in place and structuring it in a way that enables it to be embedded, not just carried by a few people in the district. Mm-hmm. So it makes it kind of part of the ethos of the district, mm-hmm. and it enables us to operationalize this in ways that directly translates to teaching practice. Mm-hmm. 2.2 is institutionalizing systems and structures to ensure an inclusive culture and sense of belonging for staff and students. And this is work that FA and her Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging will be leading with our equity leads, and I'll share that momentarily. And then implementing structures and systems to promote family and community engagement. And recognizing that we have to do this work collectively with families. This is not the school district does the work and families hear about it. We need to be, we are one team, and we need to design systems to make that happen. It won't happen organically. And then finally, operations, facilities, and finance. Communication was, I think, a central part of the feedback that I heard in the fall. It carried through the entire year. So we need to be working on not just trying to do better, but working on building systems that support everybody and knowing what they need to communicate, how, and how we create entry points for families as well and community. Human resource system, again, was something that was highlighted during my listening and learning and in my experience throughout last year. As you know, we have two positions. So Dr. Watts is no longer, this position is no longer carrying HR. Just doing a full-time job in 0.6, but we now have two positions instead of one, and it's responding to the need to really focus on a system that both supports retention of staff and it supports a culture that is healthy, that promotes wellness among all of our staff, and that keeps us, I think, professional and allows us to kind of support every staff member in the way that they need to be supported. Budget and facilities. So Katie coming in, this is kind of ideal timing for her to kind of move forward with this, this strategic priority. We are already beginning this work. We're excited about where that's headed. And then finally, the 3.4 I mentioned earlier, which is honestly our placeholder for all of the things that we are working on. Katie has a list of all of the 3.4s, we're calling them, which are the things that we realize we need to document this. We need to talk about how are we going to connect this person who does this over at Tucker, this person who does this at Collicott. Right now they're doing these things differently, and we need to not just create a piece of paper and send it, but we need to engage everybody in talking through how are we going to do this, and then how does it connect to the other pieces of the system. And it's really easy in this work to try to solve all the little things without stepping back a little bit and connecting the pieces together. So that is something that as we're starting this work, and I shared this with staff at opening day, one of the foci for me is to help all of us build understanding as we're doing this, and not try to just treat the symptoms. So that is a good segue into.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so is there timing behind this? So to your point that the institutionalizing is further down, but I guess kind of where my question is, when we look at the human resource system, like knowing that that's been a big piece. To your point, it was one role. I would imagine that in order to do that, you need that expertise. Somebody who's got from the standpoint, like we used to have when my old company, the HR person was also, they were sort of, their role was also about like the culture of the company, ensuring that like there's learning and development and so there was that piece of it. So it's a knowledge base. I mean, it's a very specific knowledge base. So is that and knowing right now that it's staffed differently, is the idea to bring in somebody who has that's their and then is that sort of a further down the road? That I guess that's why I was asking about the timing. Is that
I mean, the priority this year in that priority, strategic priority, is to bring in a consultant to do an audit of our HR systems to help us. So an expert, like you're saying, given where we are right now, and the fact that we don't have someone in that position full time with that expertise.
right?
So that's kind of how we've structured the timeline. If you look on the further down in the document, that's how we've structured. If you look at the action plan for this year and the action steps, it relates to where we are right now and who we are. Yeah. That's good point.
You have 8 sub-bullets for just that one.
I have a question also. I'm looking at the details of the implementation plan, and one of the big team member is communication coordinator. Who is that?
Stephanie O'Keefe.
Oh, okay. All right.
Who is a 0.5 position. She saw her name on here like 4 or 5 times. She's like,
I have another
And
question.
the structure, and just, okay, can you just move? The structure of the plan, the implementation plan is 5 years, and this is the timeline. So each strategic priority has a timeline. And then there's further detail in the action plan, which is guiding our work for this year. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
But my question is about HR. Does the town have HR department? Yes.
Yep.
So there is a HR department in the town wide.
I think they have just one person, right?
They may
That's
have
separate from the schools.
There's a town HR.
Like a town HR person does not handle the HR matters related to school staff.
Correct. We pass our information, obviously, as we're all under the umbrella of the town. So there's a lot of information that gets passed over to town HR for processing, but the school department is ultimately responsible for collecting all of the documentation. And,
Okay. I'm just like thinking in my head, like, does it make sense to have one central person throughout the whole town to handle all the hiring for public matters, like in terms of town governments, the town
The
employees?
majority of staff members are here, right?
Sorry, that's my
So-
bedtime alarm.
If there was an HR, like a town, someone that did both, they would have to really know the school system very well, and know teaching and learning, and know, like, it's a unique skill set to do HR within a school system. I mean, it would be possible, but
That's true.
I just remain shocked that, again, we have 600 employees. And not even a full one, you don't even have one FTE for 600 people is, I think we are really thin. We have one person for 350, and that's like, feels really efficient, but you're stretching it. Yeah, one for 600 is.
When you hear people
crazy.
make comparisons across education and corporations, corporations of 600 people have a whole department.
Yeah,
Yes.
100%.
It's true.
I mean, with
I know,
that
just
it's-
onboarding, it's
Yes.
the HR piece.
yeah,
Yes.
so it's not
Yes.
apples to apples at all. And it's something, I mean, I'm glad you're raising it up so that these are the kinds of things that are all part of the budget conversation as you're looking at the 5. I mean, the timeline is helpful because I know that whenever we're having the discussion about an operational override, like, it is looking that far into the future and identifying what the needs are in that phased manner. So
And I
It's
don't mean to
important.
belabor the HR piece, but I do think, like, when you look at the strategic plan, a lot of it, it's about a shared vision, it's about culture, and if the HR piece is separate and it's transactional, and it just it will never happen, like, because it's about who you're bringing in, what they know when they're coming in. It's
well, and I can tell you that I've had, like, I'm not sure healing is the right term, but everything that's happened when HR is not functioning well, it's harder to work through things that can be worked through if there's an issue. I mean, that's the whole design of it. And so I have definitely seen that, like, I've seen the absence of it, and that's why I feel pretty strongly about the need for it. And I think that's a great point. It's like, it's culture.
and turnover is costly. It's like financially costly, and it doesn't serve our kids. So I appreciate the focus on that retention and recruitment, because we've also, identified the need to recruit diverse employees that reflect our student population. So it's an important focus for sure. I feel like I've heard you mention audit like 2 times. transportation, HR. But I think that's, it's helpful to set a baseline, which is really like what you're doing. I mean, you're coming into this system, you started like less than 2 months ago. That's, so baseline setting is still occurring as we're transforming the system.
And there's, I think one of the benefits is there has been previous work in a lot of areas. We were talking this morning about putting together our action teams. If you want to go ahead to slide 9. Those in the audience, you can find this on our website. So don't try to read that.
It's under the superintendent section
Yes.
of the website.
Yeah, it's under superintendent. So that is kind of the design of, I think, most of our teams that are carrying the strategic priorities are going to be looking back at all the great work that's happened, consolidating it, and kind of building an understanding of, at one level probably below the priority report. The intention of the priority report was to help to build understanding collectively around where we are. That was baseline setting. The groups are going to take it like a step further. So as the group looks at MTSS, they'll look at the pockets that are like working great here. This school is doing this here, which is great. So they'll put that together into a, kind of a baseline analysis to then move from to say, based on where we are and where we have strength and area for growth, these are the moves we're going to make. So we're not going to just go out and buy MTSS off the shelf and then drop it in and expect it to like grow like a chia pet. Not sure where that came from. It was just in my head. I have no idea why.
Just aged yourself.
But everyone here understood it.
You'll be singing that song.
We're all excited. We're all excited.
Yeah, the students that are watching are like,
It's like a crystal growing kit, similar.
So the structure of this illegible but colorful chart is strategic priority on the left are action steps, which we've identified for each strategic priority. This is work that happened over the summer with our full leadership team. The team members that are going to carry this work, and then our outcome indicators for the year. There were a lot of questions from staff after they read through this, asking about, are we going to stick to this like cold? Are we going to, how are we going to monitor? And one of the things I shared is that will be the purpose of creating an action plan each year is to build off of our understanding of the previous year and to be able to kind of move and shift to stay on track. We're not going to recreate new strategic priorities. We're going to keep on the path, but knowing how work develops, you can never truly map out 5 years and expect to be in the same place even in year 2, much less year 5. Exactly, right? So we will be listening and learning from everybody who's doing this work, who's both on an action team, but I think more importantly, the staff that are carrying the work and helping them to see kind of how they're shaping this work as well. And then the final slide there is the assessment of the plan. I mentioned this previously that we're going to be working on a final report at the end of each year where we'll assess our progress on the plan and we'll be sharing and we'll be talking about prior to the completion of this report, the kinds of outcomes that are meaningful for us to track over the course of this plan. So our kind of key performance indicators. Yes.
So really appreciate sort of the way this has been laid out. It's very clear. I think what I don't see here, and I'm sure you're thinking about it, is what are the resources that you will need to be able to move all this work forward? And sort of if you could speak to that, and I don't mean just dollars, right? Dollars are obviously something that would probably expedite a lot of this. But just as you think about what it will take and what we'll have to give.
I think on the financial side, I think this is an ideal frame for building on FY26.
Yep.
And we talked last year about trying to fund our vision while we were trying to develop our vision. And we identified things that were pretty important going into this year. We didn't get all of them, but we identified them. So on the resource side for this work, we will have time this year. I think the timing is good to start to begin to unpack kind of what the resource needs will be in each area and be able to then bring that to our budget conversations and tie it back directly to this work. So I think on that side, we're talking about the budget process as the means, as opposed to putting it on here right now saying, here are the resources we're going to need.
Yeah.
Because we really want those teams and staff to come to it too, as opposed to like preordaining what it will be. So that's kind of our thinking around financial resources. I think the human capacity is one of the, I think I talked about that for quite a while in my opening day remarks, because this is overwhelming. And some staff, when they read it, I mean, someone shared, and Mark was there, and someone shared in the meeting, this is overwhelming, not in a bad way. There's just a lot here. And I'm already doing, as a teacher, you're already like at 110%, right? So you're at 110%, and then the district comes in with all these like great ideas. Hey, look at this. And you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
So I talked about the need for us to, on the capacity side, to continue to talk about what can we carry and what do we need to prioritize that we're, as a central office team, very, very focused on making sure that we're not moving so fast that people aren't with us. And that's tricky because we also feel a lot of urgency around this work and don't want to wait too. So it's that balancing act. But I guess that's kind of what I think about when I think about the resource need is certainly like some of the positions we've identified would be really helpful. On the, we were talking about HR previously, like an HR director would be huge in terms of moving a lot of this work forward on priority 3. But I think the capacity piece is very, very important. And that is another reason why we're doing an action plan every year is, we said we were going to do all these things in year 1. We're going to do our best. And if we're doing too much and people seem confused and don't know why we're doing this or why we're doing that, we need to make sure that we're communicating well, we're putting the things in place that are easy to put in place, we don't need to spend a lot of time on, and maybe some things that we thought would go in a month might take 3 months.
In terms of
So it's cultural, I think, partly.
Yeah, and in building that as you go, a resource of time, specifically looking at the teams for priority 1, is this work that will be taking place during our professional development set aside time? Is that part of your process as well? I mean, we know re-looking at our calendar, that's like one of the things that we said we would do this year as well. Do we have the right amount of time? Is it structured the right way to support this work for these teams that incorporate educators? Or is this stipended work that's taking place like outside of
We're
those
still
hours?
working on that. I mean, we have talked about trying to do it during the day because we think it's more productive during the day, but we have to finalize
Like common planning time type stuff, or just
common planning time, or I mean, this
covering people?
it depends. Yeah, I mean, it depends if you're talking about the action team members that are listed here, or you're talking about working with all staff or grade levels or elementary staff.
Or just
So-
who is included in educators, like as a bullet. I'm sure that depends on what, you know,
Yeah.
which action step is being worked on. So I don't,
Yeah.
you know, I'm just, those are some dots that can get connected through your process of, because I think that
We are definitely
obviously helps the community understand what is that time used for. And
it's
you
going to
know.
be highly. I mean, I Mark heard a little bit about this at the remarks in terms of I shared like a little snapshot of the professional learning for the first few days and talked about the work we had done as a leadership team to build that out, connecting it to the implementation plan. At the same time, we've got very few professional development days, and there are other things that people want to cover and other work that is ongoing that kind of needs to be covered. So we're trying to balance that, but there is definitely going to be work happening during our professional development time on the implementation plan. That's where we can get staff to be part of this work.
Right.
It does not happen as much as I like to think it does in my communications, my nice emails, like those kinds of things are helpful, but that's not real engagement. And that's why last spring, when we're rushing to get the priority report done, we had that one day that we were like sprinting towards because we knew we needed staff together physically to talk about all this work and for them to feel connected to it. So that is part of our design for this year, is connecting them in a real palpable way to the development and getting their feedback in ways that are meaningful. I mean, we'll certainly do some surveying and things like that, but we'll also be having them weigh in discussion. And then principals will also be leading that at the building level. So when they're at their faculty meeting, they'll all in October be talking about the budget strategic priority or MTSS or whatever we decide kind of makes sense at that time.
Right.
Makes sense.
So that's it.
I mean, I think this is really, really well done. I love that you have kind of built off of our strategic plan that we had previously, kind of taken the goodness from that and kind of really created this framework and structure that is like a path forward. You know, I know you had that slide in the PowerPoint that had the path forward, but I really do think that was something that we were missing before.
Yeah.
Right? Like, these are great ideas that we all felt very strongly about, but no way of getting from here to there. And now there is this. And regardless of how long it takes, you know, at least there's a shared vision. And what I love about this also is it's not just all of us here, but also the staff and community members who have all weighed in on this. And you've collected all that information. So there are no surprises here. You know, it's all with everyone's input, and it's very well done. I'm really, really impressed having read through it. And it also, I love that you're indicated team members. I think that also helps with accountability, like who's doing what, you know, and that's something I think we've struggled in the past before. Like when I've seen presentations, it's just, you know, so I love that, you know, this shared vision that you've talked about, and it's like, it is becoming a reality, and it's pretty exciting. So thank you for all the work that you guys put into it.
And we'll be bringing updates to us, I
All the
guess,
time.
quarterly.
Probably more often than that. Yeah, I mean,
On the
a formal
Yeah.
one quarterly, but yeah. Be good update. States frequently.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else under your report tonight?
I don't think so.
Great, thanks. So under the chair's report, the first thing is the school committee handbook, which, as we all know, is something we've spent a lot of time on in our governance retreats over this past year. And so this is exciting because it's our night to hopefully adopt this first official version we passed as a draft late last spring. We have since worked to refine it. We've incorporated advice from our legal counsel to make sure that it lines up with all the relevant state and federal laws. We've tried to crosswalk it with our policy books, and that is actually one update I'll flag. Thanks to Anna.
And Mark.
We added one more policy reference under, section about the subcommittees. Sorry. We'll have to find it. Anyway, all we did was add in the policy reference, which was missing, about process for identifying advisory committee chair and members. I was right at page 6, policy BDF subcommittees. We have tried to make sure that it references our policies, and the point for that is if or when our policies are updated, it's our policy sort of supersedes our handbook. But I'm proud. I'll just say, for anybody who hasn't necessarily followed along this process, I think the feedback we've received, including from our attorneys, is that we're in following this sort of vision that was set through our work beginning with you, with the governance core, and looking at exemplars from other school boards and school committees. This is a best practice that we're able to bring to Milton that we haven't done before. And it does support our onboarding, which was a goal that we had last year to build that out. And so it's taken a lot of time to get us to this point. This would be a handbook that we would refresh and re-adopt every year, just as we did at our previous meeting, all the other handbooks for staff, as well as our schools, which are our student and family handbooks. So that's just the framing. And we have a couple of questions that I do want to kind of touch on to, see what final thinking we might have as we dot the I's, cross the T's, and hopefully vote on this evening. The one thing that you can see here, I kept this as a kind of an exchange in here because it was some conversation that took place with Josh, and this is a complication in terms of having used our policy language, which isn't always the clearest. And you can see that on the top of page 4. That's one thing. Proposed keeping it for now, and flagging the fact that it's a little bit unclear. Not sure if any of you have thoughts on how we could better clarify what we understand the meaning of that bullet point to be, as far as our purpose in relation to informing the community and keeping the district informed in turn. The wording is awkward. I think that was the only outstanding thing that I wanted to see what you all thought. And of course, whatever other thoughts you want to weigh in on before we try to adopt it. You'll see what I'm talking about. You can see this very clunky. Do we want to wordsmith this, or can we kind of keep it? I mean, that's the bottom line.
It's basically meaning being transparent with the citizen of the town about what the school needs and what the people's needs are.
That and the other way too.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like serving as a conduit, kind of going both ways.
And vice versa.
And the whole point of any school committee, I guess, is
Yeah.
like public.
Make it
Voice
just easy to
within
understand, right? Provide adequate and transparency between the needs of the citizens and the schools.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know what the risk is, I guess, of this staying vague. I mean, it's probably could be worded better, and I'm certainly open if somebody has that, but I don't know from like a policy
It's not
perspective,
gonna-
like what
it's not
what
make
a
or
school,
break.
yeah.
We couldn't come up, I think we couldn't, I couldn't, but we couldn't come up with anything like so much better to try to capture it. I mean, I think it comes down to our goals, which is the next thing we're going to talk about as far as like what actions are we taking to make this actually happen. So
along those lines, I would be fine with keeping it.
I mean, if you read the first sentence, it sounds like, your job would be for me to tell you something, and then you tell it to public. And that's how I read that, because provide direct means for the administration to keep local citizens straight. So
that's having these meetings where we invite you to provide updates the way you just did.
yeah,
Right? I mean, I think that's what that is.
I think so.
yeah, I think like you said, Mark, it could be reworded, but it's not. You could leave it for next year.
Yeah.
It's not going to change.
Okay.
the nature.
So are we okay for now? Can I resolve the comment?
I'm fine.
I'm
with
just gonna, there I went, I did that. Thank you, Josh, for your feedback. Okay, does anyone else have comments or suggestions?
About the whole overall?
Yeah.
My only, it's more of a editing piece to go over it because it just, and I know it's kind of getting into the nitty gritty, but it kind of goes back and forth between capitalizing chair, not capitalizing chair, capitalizing school committee. I think just going through it.
The plan is to design this into a document that's easier to read. After you all are like thumbs up, to put it into like a format that we can update, but that. So I think we can
Edit as you do
edit
that.
it as we
Edit
move
for
it.
that.
Yeah.
I'll make a note, edit for consistency,
Yeah.
capitalization.
I can do that.
I can.
I did have one question though, and about, and this, I don't know if, I guess my question is this standard, when it was talking about if somebody, I'm trying to find it, I just had it over here. Essentially, if somebody leaves the school committee and you're replacing them, like somebody comes in, so is that, and it's, am I reading it correctly that it would be, within a certain time frame, somebody who is registered voter would indicate their desire to be considered, and then is it the school committee and the select board that make that decision? It's not a public vote. Is that correct? That's the way it reads. Like it doesn't go to a
Usually
town
it's an
vote. It
appointment.
goes to it's an appointment.
It's
It's
an
an
appointment
appointment.
to fill out.
The rest
For
of
the
the
rest
term.
of the term.
Until the
Yeah.
next election, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think it has to stay on track though, doesn't it?
In-
If you're on a 3-year term and you leave after 1 year,
Yeah, the appointments for the next 2 years.
yeah,
It says till the
Yeah.
next election in here.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
The
the
election
Oh,
for
that's the
that.
way I understood
for that, yeah, because they all have to stay like two each year.
Got it.
Yeah, so maybe the next election
Oh.
for that position. That's
So
So that needs to
what
be
page are you
clarified.
on?
I'm sorry, let me go and find
7.
it. Thank you.
vacancies on the school committee.
Oh, so you fulfill someone's term
Yeah, it says
until
Yeah.
they're done. Okay.
and entitled to vote and shall serve until the next election. It doesn't say the next.
Yeah, it's unclear.
Oh, yeah. That could,
Until
yeah.
the end of the term of the seat.
Yep.
And so is that currently the way it is?
Is my understanding based on bylaws. I know that slightly because it's coming up a little bit with 2 select board members who are running
Right.
for different seats. And so if they were to abandon their seat early, that was my understanding of what would happen.
Okay.
The thing I'm confused that you're raising it here is, and I assume this is coming from a policy or the town bylaws, is the involvement of the select board within the school committee
Right.
seat. Right, we're not-
And just the clarity around how long that term they're serving is. Because that's not clear, I think. The way it's written, it just says the next election.
Mm-hmm.
So if
That
it's,
should be clear.
yeah.
So I think the select board piece, my understanding of this is that that's a mechanism for publicizing the vacancy sort of through the town.
Yeah, I think you're
The
right.
select board doesn't have a role other than,
But it says
the
must
votes.
receive a majority of
The
votes
votes.
of the remaining school committee members and select board entitled to vote.
And shall
So,
serve until, yeah.
I'm wondering if
sorry.
some of this
Yeah,
is
I
coming
see,
from
I
like
see, I see. Sorry.
the template we were using and less from the bylaws of the town.
Got it. Okay.
And so those bylaws would have been, those are just the overall town bylaws, like that we went through and renumbered and everything last year. That have to do, those bylaws have to do with everything within the town, or specifically this.
No, we just changed the policies. We didn't
For this.
change
Right.
bylaws. Bylaws.
Right, that's what I'm saying, the bylaws have to do with. The only reason I'm asking is like, from this, so say for example, I just came in, but next month I said, I can't fulfill it. You just had an election, but then it's just like to have somebody be appointed for a 3-year term by
Yeah.
this committee and the select board doesn't seem.
But I think that's how it is. And again, I don't think that is us to decide how we
Right,
want to handle it. I
was my
think it's
question.
like the town has a
Is that a
bylaw
bylaw?
passed by town meeting that says what the process
That's like a
is.
national status quo, as far as
Oh.
in my experience in other states, that's how it's been too.
I only bring it up because in Weymouth, they do a vote. They did a runoff. They did a special.
did
They did, yeah. Because
For school committee
for
members.
school committee member, because somebody left. So they had to run for the seat, and then they had to rerun at the end of the year. Because they only completed the calendar year. But I understand if that's the bylaw, but I just think the way this is written isn't very clear on the.
I agree with you. I mean, I think, can we just run this section by the
Yeah.
town councilor just to get them to
Yeah, so
clarify
we can
what?
run it by the town council. We have run it by our district
Yeah.
legal team. So yeah, we can ask for that. But I think that the wording because what we're outlining here is a procedure that's driven by our town bylaws, it should be whatever the wording is.
Well, I'm looking at BBBC, school committee member resignation, vacancies, extended absences, and it states this same language, but a person so elected shall be a registered voter of the town must receive a majority of the votes of the officers entitled to vote. So it doesn't say anything about select board there. And it says that same language.
Yeah.
Yeah. Serve until the next election.
So this is, thank you for flagging this. We should check on it. I think I actually am not, now that we're having this discussion, I'm not, I think it may be the case that they don't fill out the term, they just serve until the next, and that might be 11 months or 1 month, depending on how quickly before the election they're.
And then a vote for 1 year, like a 1 year term.
Well, that is the question, how you get back on track to staggering out the, sorry, yes, I guess so. I mean, we do that for town meeting members, actually. You know, you could run for a 1 or 2 year term.
Yeah.
That's the seat
We
that's
can
open
research
for you
this
to
and-
run to.
Yeah.
So I think if we make a motion to approve this, then I'll just amend the motion to say, you know, this paragraph, if we're all comfortable with the fact that the final language in this paragraph will be clarified to the town council according to our bylaws. And is that okay? Does anyone have any other parts that you wanted to discuss or change?
Just to be clear, all the things say missing, that's just left over from in the table of contents where that's stuff that
Take
in a previous draft we were missing and we had to add it. But now
Okay.
they're all
going
good.
back through to, okay, that will be part of our final edit. Final.
And I'm happy to just delete all the missings right now in the public meeting.
Okay, so I will make a motion to approve the Milton School Committee handbook, including final edits, capitalization, table of contents, and confirmation of the language on page 7, vacancies on the school committee in accordance with town bylaws per town legal counsel review. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Great. Thanks everybody for your work on that. The next piece is our draft 2024-25 school committee goals. So this is just a discussion. It's the first time that we are looking at these since we discussed it at our summer retreat. I did my best to reflect the sort of brainstorming that we did in that time. And I'm interested in whatever thoughts or feedback you may have. As you see, again, I flagged a couple areas that I know coming in, I'm like looking for a little bit of feedback around. And this is a chance to just discuss, take in your input and edits, and then we will bring it back to our next meeting to hopefully approve these goals. At our last meeting, for anyone watching, we went through an assessment of our progress toward our FY24 goals, and we developed these for the coming year, the current year, kind of based on that. So, I had flagged really just the wording. I'm hoping to kind of assess the academic outcomes of historically underperforming groups within the system through the analysis of student data. I'm just wondering about like whether that exact wording kind of captures our role in that work. We like, to what extent are we the ones who are assessing the outcomes, analyzing the student data?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a little bit more under the purview of your team.
Mhm.
You would be bringing that information to us. However, for us to, what are the verbs for the goal that we want to set for ourselves in relation to that topic?
Yeah, so thinking of this one, I was thinking that our role is more to monitor, but not to be the ones assessing. So we keep an eye out.
Okay, so monitor academic outcomes. Through, I mean, are we processing the analysis of the student data? We are not conducting that analysis.
No.
We are,
I mean, we're asking for the analysis to come to us, right? And then for us to then ask questions and understand if things are not moving.
Yeah.
But we're not doing the analysis ourselves.
requesting and engaging with. Something like that.
Maybe just put up the data provided by the administration team.
So within the system through
the analysis of student data provided by the administration team.
Okay. Does that capture it?
Is there a follow-up to that though? Do you know what I mean? Like, so if you're monitoring the academic outcomes, but then are you reviewing then it's sort of the then what? You're like, oh, it went up, it went down. Do you know it down? Like there's a sort of so what in that? Like what's the next piece of it? Do you know what I mean? Like it, and then, because then it's like depending on what that data is telling you, is there something that we do, like do we review the plans to address, challenges or?
I mean, I think that comes back to one thing I am wondering about, which we're going to touch on this shortly, but it's the idea of peer evaluation. And that is a clear function of the school committee, is to conduct the evaluation of the superintendent. On some level.
That's kind of where some of that comes back, is the evaluation.
Yeah, and we actually have not named that in our goals, and I guess I'm suggesting we maybe should. Under governance, and like to me, that would fall under that category. Because like, what's the point of our monitoring? It's to understand like the extent to which we are making progress, and our vehicle for that is through our evaluation process.
Well, I mean, that's one, but I mean, I think the other thing I was thinking is it's through, I mean, you all do an incredible amount of support for the work that not just I'm doing, but the work that a lot of people are doing. So there's like, one of the responses to that is everything you do both in the community relative to that monitoring is supporting the work that's shifting those data points. Right. So like, and that takes so many different forms.
That includes like the budget,
That
securing
includes
the
like,
resources.
It includes like going to the select board and talking about the budget, or like just, community outreach that we're doing, or the formal and informal ways that I think that's the other piece I was just thinking about.
How do you feel if we add ongoing in here by saying monitor the ongoing academic outcomes of historically underperforming groups? So
it's not just a static data point.
Yeah, so it's not like we just receive the data of what is presented to us and then we may
because then it
ask questions, etc. But like we monitor the ongoing progress of it.
What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Okay. So is everyone comfortable with this new edited language for that rule? Okay. So the next pieces were under community engagement. This is the wording from last year. This was the one goal that we identified we really didn't make much progress toward achieving from last year. Working to develop a communication strategy with clear, coherent messaging and a process for proactive community engagement by school committee members. So my question here is, do we want to just carry forward this language and, try some new things to make progress towards that? Or is there a way we want to update the wording to sort of slightly reframe that goal?
I'm wondering if there's a way of tying this one bullet to bullet one of under the student achievement, academic achievement and well-being. Because we don't want to sort of develop a communication strategy that is disconnected from the overall plan of the district, right? So how do we develop or work with the superintendent to develop a communication strategy that's clear, coherent, but it really does support the overall vision of where we're going. We don't want to sort of on our own create a strategy that's disconnected.
That's a good point. So it could stay where it is under community engagement,
Right.
but it would say work with the superintendent to develop a communication strategy with, or even just a communication strategy for school committee to support the execution of the implementation plan and the action plan?
Yeah, well, and I think it's part of it is that, but there might be something that comes up that
Priorities
that
of
we're
the district.
discussing. Exactly,
Okay.
that we want to make sure that we are aligned. It's the question, to what end?
Strategy.
Yeah. I agree with that because I think that was part of the challenge when we talked about this last year. Just like, what should we do a newsletter? Well, what's the point of that newsletter separate from this newsletter?
Still doing.
Just look busy.
One thing I want to add is that from the Cunningham Connect newsletter from Dr. Redding, there's a section where he put your note in it with the links to the implementation plans. That's actually where I see the implementation plan firsthand, including the action plans that you shared tonight. So perhaps maybe just a link to the last school committee meeting, what's it called? Agenda? No.
Recording to YouTube.
No, maybe, yeah, the recording to the YouTube video
minutes?
and the minutes. Yes, the minutes. And just a link to it, to those principals' weekly emails. Whoever, it's very transparent. Our meeting is recorded, it's broadcast. All the minutes is provided online. It's just a matter of fact where people sees it, they might want to click on it. But if they don't see it, they will never click on things or look for it.
They have to go looking for it.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe just provide that extra help. Here you are. This is what happened in the last school committee meeting. Here are a few the agenda. This is the minutes, and this is the video. Bam. That's a step.
Did you get my email? I sent the.
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
I just want you to know I did send it before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay.
you sent a lot of email to me. I was still in vacation mode, so I tried to avoid.
50 meeting notices. I think it got lost. It was like right after that. I mean, yeah.
I like that rewording.
But that's a really good suggestion, Bo, and that's like the kind of thing that we could actually come up with, when we do this work to develop this which, would become like an agenda item for us to talk about like in future, right? So is this update acceptable?
I like that.
Okay. All right, last two pieces. So, we've had these ideas. Maybe, this is something I would offer. Can we maybe not have like specific, I see both of these questions around our role in attending MPS events, as well as like our, hosting community forums around the budget, calendar, or other topics that, in a way, I could see those falling under the bullet we just created above, rather than like such granular things that we want to necessarily commit to right now. But I don't know what you all think about that. We haven't had a chance to talk about our like purpose, for example, in attending MPS events. We just sort of had that as an idea of something we would want to strategize around, like how we try to show up in the community for things. But
Well, I think those point to community engagement. Those feel like two examples of a community engagement.
yeah,
And then I think from there, you have a plan around what are the events we go to attend. Yeah. So it feels more, to your point, granular. It feels almost like a subset of the bullet above, as opposed to its own. Because then it is a conversation around that. Like, what do you attend? What's the role? What are the forums?
Yeah.
okay. So my note that I'm just putting here is those are examples of community engagement as stated above, not their own standalone goals. And so then I would delete them. Okay. Any other points on this?
Sorry, I'm stuck on the monitor, the ongoing academic outcomes. I'm trying to figure out when we're looking at like the other bullets, like support the enhancement of effective instructional practices by implementing regular reviews of relevant student data. So that's student data as a whole. It's sort of the same thing. I guess, like I know in my head why, like the importance of this, but I guess I'm trying to figure out as a separate bullet point, what's the goal? Do you know what I mean? So right now, monitoring just feels very passive. And not that there's an action, but I guess that's the part, like what's our goal in looking at this data?
I guess in my opinion, the goal of looking at the data, the goal of putting it as a goal, right, is like to highlight the things that we want to make sure we are consistently kind of doing within meetings, right, that we're elevating within our conversations that potentially guide Peter in the work and the goals he sets for himself and the district and his team around like the work they are doing. And so anything I think we put as it relates to these specific goals, I think are things we are highlighting as a group, saying like, this is of the utmost important that we want to make sure we are having ongoing discussions, feedback, reviews of, again, whether monitoring or assess or some other verb is the better one. But to me, that's the point of specifically mentioning kind of historically underperforming groups versus just like students broadly, is to, again, not just let that be lost within the like, oh, we'll capture that within students broadly, but like, no, we want to look at this specifically and name that clearly for him as he works to prepare whatever presentations we see.
Right. I guess from the standpoint of someone who would watch the meetings or be, say, in CPAC meetings, this has constantly been monitored, but not like, I guess the feeling is like, okay, this data has been shared multiple times and I don't want to say nothing's been done, but it's sort of like you share data and you talk about it. So I think it's sort of like what, and I mean, I think about MTSS, like that sort of as you're looking at the tiered systems of support and, you know, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and how is that affecting these outcomes? And then when I put it in that framework, it helps. But right now it feels just sort of like passing data with no intent.
I think it's reiterating the vision. I mean, I think ending that statement is to close the achievement gap or the opportunity gap, right? Like that's the purpose of monitoring it. But I think like looking at the implementation plan and all of the action steps that is the work. The monitoring is to make sure that works. And that's where evaluation comes in for me, is communicating with me that, you know, you're monitoring, so you have the understanding at the school committee level of where we are and have an understanding where we need to be, and that we're working together to make sure that the actions that we're taking align with your vision as like the highest leader in the district of where we should go. So that monitoring part is like kind of a classic school board term for governance. Like monitor is like one of the kind of like key action verbs for school committee.
Because anything else is the work, which they unfortunately we don't get to do. We don't have the skill expertise to do, right? And they do.
Unless you can do logos.
But we get to hold them accountable. But we get to hold you accountable. I think that's the thing that this gives us, right? It's the accountability.
Yeah, I'm saying that this is.
I mean, could we combine those two bullets together and like, I don't know.
Do you know what I mean?
I'm
Sort of
wondering.
like
I
the
see
support-
exactly what you're saying,
So-
because we talk about student data and then we're talking about analysis of student data, but could we do like including ongoing or academic outcomes of historically underperforming groups? Because that way you're also supporting the enhancement of effective education instructional practices. And then we could,
because then that gets into the MTSS.
so that way we're highlighting it because it's very important, but we're also looking at supporting, right? Because I think that's what it's
support
missing.
piece,
Like what we're monitoring and then what, right? Like,
Let me just try this. Okay, so based on what you just suggested, support the enhancement of effective instructional practices by implementing regular reviews of relevant student data, including the academic outcomes of historically underperforming groups within the system.
Yes.
And take everything else away.
So,
Period.
what do you think about that?
It gives me a little pause, just because it's embedded in the larger. And so if we hold it as its own, it gives it a little bit more weight in my mind to make sure that it's not just in the effort of enhancing effective instructional practices, but it's also about, are we doing right by the groups that often get left behind? And so that's that's different to me. So it holds it sort of lifts it up as something that we want to hold ourselves to across everything that we're doing. So for instance, like, let's go back to, if we think about looking at any policy that we look at that's new, thinking about the residency policy, would we then be looking at cutting the data to look at historically underperforming groups based on the third bullet alone? Or we, by, sort of, I don't know, there's just something to me that keeping it distinct puts more weight on it.
Right.
Than if we embed it under another bullet.
So what if we did something like keep it its own bullet, but back to monitor, like you're raising, Amanda, add in something like support the, so add in something that achieves what the clause, like support the enhancement of effective instructional practices. Like, okay, what are we support?
Right. I
Are
think
we
it's-
supporting the closure of our opportunity gap? Like, are we sort of stating what our goal, like the goal of the goal? I mean, that's not it, but
To ensure we're on track
right.
in reducing the opportunity gap.
I think that's the piece that I'm missing is the why.
like, yes. So could I add that to the end of the sentence? Or would you have that at the beginning of the sentence?
I'll try to
Would
put
it
it
be-
in.
Would it be monitoring and improving the academic outcomes? So that as a way to close the achievement gap, like because
But we're not.
aware, yeah,
Yeah.
and
But
supporting the, something along the.
Can you
Yeah,
say
'cause if
again what you said?
To ensure the district is on track.
Eliminating, being on track toward eliminating is measurable, but
Yeah, I mean, we had long conversations.
Closing the
Closing.
achievement gap.
Do we call it opportunity? Is it called opportunity gap now or achievement gap?
I mean, I think you're talking about it as an opportunity gap, right?
I feel like that's
I mean, this
more
is
what
like
people talk about
Yeah.
than achievement gap.
Yeah.
Achievement gap
Have
is
seen
like
this.
Yes.
previous.
Yeah.
Opportunity.
Okay, so monitor the ongoing academic outcomes of historically underperforming groups within the system through the analysis of student data provided by the MPS administrative team to ensure the district is on track toward closing the opportunity gaps.
That feels a lot better.
Yeah.
Toward closing. Toward closing its opportunity gaps. Is everyone okay with this? Okay.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that
that's
last part is important.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
That I like that was good how you just worked through that because it achieves both the sort of the pieces that you were talking about that are both important.
Thank
you. Okay. Any other points? Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll keep this like draft as our record of our revision process, but I'll just create a clean copy that will be in our folder for our next meeting, and we'll just vote to approve it at our next meeting. And then it will go on the website, and hopefully the community will read it for themselves to hold us accountable for our progress toward our goals, which we're doing well. Okay, so moving on then, it's getting late. The last piece under my report tonight is brief. It's just to kind of touch upon the superintendent evaluation process and just to kind of lay out, we haven't yet created like a document, an anchor document like we had last year, but we'll do that and share it around just to kind of orient ourselves. At our next meeting, September 18th, we're planning to hear from the superintendent about your goals, to be able to discuss that with you and vote to approve your goals. After we've done that, at the second September meeting, I think the subcommittee will reconvene, and that will be when we so that's Mark, Anna, and myself. And we will just kind of start up the process, I think, with you, Peter, for the year, knowing the bulk of our work will take place January through March. January 8th, we have scheduled your mid-year evaluation discussion. And it's after that Amanda, you'll see how this works. But last year, we kind of went through this process for the first time. And we'll be aiming to conduct the final evaluation discussion on April 2nd. So this is just one of the things that we get to kick off as the new year begins. But does anyone have any questions about that timeline? Okay, so we'll hear from you about that next, and we'll look to schedule a meeting maybe later in October. Okay. Finance Subcommittee.
Great. Hey, everybody. I do have just a quick update on finance stuff. So next school committee finance meeting is September 18th. It's cross-posted in case anybody would like to join. Had some back and forth with select board, town administrator. Haven't really heard from warrant committee, but select board folks will start kind of aligned to start working together in early October. Also want to flag for everybody that the town administrator did a budget presentation to the warrant committee at their most recent meeting, which kind of went over some end of year stuff. There's a lot of free cash that they expect to be certified, which is great for funding the town. Somewhat concerning as it relates to kind of the potential override or additional funding of, similar to kind of last year. I think there's concern that things, from my perspective, I have concerns that things could drag, and then we just have level service funding because we have this, and there's not really an opportunity for us to invest more in the priorities as we were kind of talking about earlier of the implementation plan. So I think that's something that hopefully the town administrator is able to get clarity on quickly, so we have a sense. There's also obviously the connection that the select board at times have made between the school building project and the override. So again, that's just something that is up in the air, and that again was discussed a little bit during the warrant committee. So hopefully we'll start working through that in October. The motion we have for tonight is before that, any questions on that? Very broad update.
So September 18th is in the morning finance.
Yes.
At night, full school committee.
Yes.
We can begin and end our days together. It's going to be so great. Can't wait.
So we have one vendor warrant to approve, which I've signed and I've sent out at this point. Y'all have gotten all this sent out.
Thank you.
There was no vendor warrant number 6, at least that I've seen yet or signed yet. We did 5 and we did 7. So I don't think 6 happened. I'm not sure. That's just a numbering thing, but just want to name for y'all that I didn't forget to send out 6. So we're all caught up. So I will make a motion to approve vendor warrant number 7 in the amount of $361,468.33, payable on 8/29/24. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you all very much.
Would you like to keep going into the facilities advisory subcommittee, or Anna?
Pass it on to the new chair.
Okay.
Well, I have to say that Mark took really great notes, so I can report in detail tonight. Thank you, Mark. So we met last week. I think it was last week. Tom McCarthy, our new facilities director, gave us an update about quite a few things that were done over the summer. They did some things like putting new LVT flooring at Pierce Middle School in one of the classrooms. They trimmed some trees. They purchased 2 floor scrubbers for Glover and Tucker, which was really helpful so that all the schools have their own floor scrubbers and you can get things done more effectively. They did some replacements of emergency lighting at Glover and Tucker. And then just some like kind of cleanup of yard, like trees and bushes and so on and so forth. They also did, the main thing that happened this summer was the 4th floor at Cunningham. So they basically cleaned out and painted an area and turned it into a teacher's room and meeting space. Tom shared some pictures with us, which was really nice. They put a couch in there and seating area, like refrigerator and so on and so forth, trying to make it as cozy as possible under renovation. So we can use this space temporarily until we start building up there next summer. And this has allowed us, as Peter mentioned earlier, to build that floor to ceiling wall in the library for that extra classroom. They replaced the fiber mulch in the Glover, Tucker, and Cunningham and Collycott playgrounds, which was helpful, which was really good. And then in terms of, we talked about at our next meeting, we're going to actually have Arrow Street, who's going to be doing the work on the 4th floor for Cunningham. So we have, just talk about timelines and so on and so forth. So we're, they're getting us estimates that we will be discussing at our next meeting as well. And then we talked about just with that extra classroom that we're getting at Cunningham, we were able to give Collycott that classroom back for that extra kindergarten classroom they needed for the students from East Milton this year. And then that was the way we were able to get the art room back at Glover that we had discussed earlier. And then in terms of, we also did talk about, just some of the cooling efforts that we're going to look into, just collecting some data and temperature readings in terms of, because last year, I think at the beginning of the school year, it was really hot. So some of these classrooms get really hot in warm temperatures. So just kind of figuring out what the most efficient way of addressing that would be. So it's great. It's great to have the group back together. And I mean, obviously getting that 4th floor done last year was huge, or kind of started, and looking at that as an additional space at both those schools. So we're looking forward to getting more stuff done this year. So that's it.
Thank you. So will they come with plans for what the proposal for? So are they making recommendations, or do we say we want, like, we're looking for X number of?
They're talking about like a library, moving that upstairs, and then meeting spaces and offices and so on and so forth. It's a nice size space up there, so we can get quite a bit of use out of that. So hopefully we can get it done. It's more just figuring out the timeline when the kids are in the building. It's harder to work up there, so just figuring out how quickly we can move on that.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
So, and this might be part of that as well. So if they are moving the library upstairs, then what are they also doing an estimate for what it would cost to reconfigure?
That would be included.
It's
Yes.
together,
Yeah, it would be together.
Great.
Thanks.
And at the next meeting, we'll be talking about the cost estimation. So
Yes.
getting a sense of, because when we requested the 2 million, it was based on a very raw square footage size and what we think we would need.
Okay.
So we'll have a better understanding of what, given the scope of what we've talked about thus far, which is the build up that I just mentioned. So we'll have that by our next meeting. We'll have that.
By your next facilities meeting?
Yeah, so
And
I'll
then
be
you'll
able to
bring that
report
back
that
here.
on the 18th. Yeah. And the other thing too is the Pierce classroom in the library that got the actual wall on that. So we discussed that as well, which is helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay. School building committee.
School building. School building committee. So talked about the current building plan to update y'all at our last meeting. Obviously, since our last school building committee meeting and since we last provided an update, the select board declined to put the school building project up for a town-wide vote this fall. So that vote was 3-2 against, and just to make sure everybody's aware, we need 4-1 in order for the select board has to vote 4-1 in favor to put any capital project up for a town-wide 2.5 debt exclusion override in front of the town. So at that meeting, if you watched it, the select board chair indicated he was open to putting on the April ballot. So we will see. There's some potential hope there. Neither of the other two dissenting votes at this point have stated that publicly that I'm aware of. But again, that's part of the select school building committee's work, is trying to now figure out what additional information is needed by the three select board members who dissented, because there's no path forward without going through the select board. What do they need in order to get it out to in front of the vote? And so we are working with our rep from the select board, John Cohane, to try and get him to consolidate those questions so that it provides the school building committee some more direction. Because at this point, we have secured, again, the land, we have a plan, we have a cost, and so we need to get more clarity on just like how to change that plan or adjust it or get more information to answer questions so folks feel good about it. One of the unfortunate things is because of now the delay, there's a couple impacts. First is that we had a timeline of opening in 2027, fall of 2027. There's just no chance of that at this point. And so given the timeline of schools, that means that now we're shooting for fall of 2028. So unfortunately, we've lost a school year. But that's, that kind of is what it is. The other piece is that even if we are not going forward with the full building project, we need some funding because the $400,000, however much it was, that was allocated last year, is at this point kind of running out, because that was to get us through feasibility. We are now kind of at the end of feasibility. So in order to do more design, to do more kind of analysis and answer any, potentially, depending on the questions from the select board, we need further funding. So the school building committee has not voted on it yet, but we began discussing at the last meeting just a potential warrant article for a fall town meeting to receive additional funding to fund, carry the funding through design development and some construction drawings. So that is, again, in discussion. The SBC will vote on that to recommend that to the select board, and the select board would need to vote to put it on warrant and also to schedule a fall town meeting. At this point, one is not scheduled, although I think there's at least one other thing at the select board meeting that they discussed kind of having on a warrant for a fall town meeting. So those are things that were discussed related to the current plan. We also talked a bit about MSBA. I think that information maybe has been shared with y'all. I can't remember if I failed to do that. We are in the next phase of MSBA where we got invited to the senior study. This is a step beyond where we were last year. It's the same step we got to back in 2020. So we are a step further than we were, but not necessarily a step further than we've been. And they're doing a site visit at Cunningham, which is the school that we filed for. Even though we have district-wide crowding, you have to file for a particular school. So they're doing that on the 17th. So just in 2 short weeks. Ultimately, the MSB decision still falls in December, as it did last year, where they will have the board meeting and officially vote. But this certainly is positive news. There are lots of, again, other groups that are applying and are going through the senior study. So hopefully they say yes. That would be a good option to have. Again, the school building committee continues to move in kind of parallel paths on this. So we will host them, try and woo them, and convince them of our need, and then we'll find out in December. Those are the updates. Anything?
Well, I think you got it all. I think just to reiterate that, like you said, we've been there before. So it's not a sure thing, right? We're going to make the best case possible, but continuing to follow those parallel tracks makes sense because we can't get on. So MSBA supporting the project. So, yeah, that's where we are.
I did have a couple questions. The first one, you mentioned that in order for the firm to continue doing design work, is there a cost that they're looking at?
Yeah, we're thinking it's about $4 million
Okay.
would carry us from, again, where we're at currently with design. The idea is to get through design drawings for the building and then get through construction drawings for the site, for the road,
Okay.
so that then if by then, that is enough information to go to the town approves it, we can actually go out and start doing the construction work more quickly while they finish the construction drawings for the building itself, and again, just gain time back.
Okay.
So that's what's being discussed currently, but again, we don't have a firm number until they vote.
And then would be like just kind of just asking for that money so that they have it and use it as needed, or is that something that would be like upfront, like with that number? I'm just thinking, just the cost, the $4 million.
Yeah, so it's not given to the architects up front. They, would do the work and then submit invoices over time and to be approved the same way that it's happening right now.
Okay.
It's just the request is for not to give Arrow Street necessarily $4 million, but to fund the school building committee, go to town meeting, to ask the town meeting to further fund, as they've done in the past, provide the $4 million, which we think should take us through kind of enough funding to get Arrow Street to that place, as well as right now we feel pretty good about the budget that we still have for our OPM.
Okay.
But that's another part of the team that we also are paying for.
And then my next question is about the MSBA. So that's like a longer timeline, right? So if that's something that when they come to Cunningham on the 17th and they, and it's positive, like we would kind of go with their longer timeline.
Yeah,
something like that.
So if they come on the 17th, right, we whether it's positive or negative, we won't know until the board votes in December, right? And then we would be invited into their eligibility phase at the start of next year. And then as a town, we would need to decide if we're going with them. And part of that is, right, it depends on like reimbursement costs. It depends on what program we're doing. When pre-K is not eligible for MSBA funding. So that's cost the town would take on anyways if that's something we wanted to continue to do. So like the amount of eligible construction related activities, right, then shrinks and it changes. So it's just part of it is math, as we kind of talked about. The problem with the MSBA is that it's like a 5-year timeline.
Okay.
So
it's
escalation
5 years.
over 5 years,
Yeah.
especially with how escalation's been, is very costly. Not to mention the lost opportunity of just having the space, 2 to 3 years more quickly.
Yeah.
But the trade-off is you obviously get, free money from the state, money that is not put on taxpayers, and so maybe that makes it easier for taxpayers to support the project with state funding, similar to obviously what happened with the original construction. So, all that will be calculus. But again, the first step is we just have to get accepted. So that will be a good problem to have those two options.
Yeah, no, I think that's great that you're looking at both of them.
Would any of the money that they're talking about would they need, depending on what the select board came back with as far as what their questions are, the things that they needed answered, is their money in their current budget, or could they foresee using some of that money to maybe, if there are questions or things that they needed to address or look at based on the select board, could that money be used for that, or would they need, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, within our current allowance, not
Right.
counting the additional money that we might
Right.
need for.
Or
It really depends on
it
what
depends
the
on what they ask.
questions are, right?
Yeah.
There's some questions brought up by one member were related to like the energy compliance of the new building with the new code that was passed by town meeting. That is, much further into kind of design drawings as you're actually building the system within, and you're like really refining what the blueprint of the building is. And so that is something that would be very costly just because of how far you would need to get within the drawings. There could be other things that are simpler to do.
Right.
But
It just depends.
it really depends on their questions and like how detailed we actually need to have fleshed out like the layout and structure of the building in order to answer those questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Of course.
Okay, and now approval of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes for tonight. Did anyone have any changes to the minutes? Okay, so we'll start with the meeting of July 30th, 2024. We'll take these separately since we had value. We're not at the second one. So I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Milton School Committee meeting of July 30th, 2024. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And then I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Milton School Committee meeting of August 22nd, 2024.
I abstain.
Second?
Second.
Okay. So all in favor? Abstaining? Okay. Thank you. And that just brings the next meeting agenda item. So we're going to hear from the superintendent, as we've said, about your goals for a discussion and a vote. We will also be voting on our school committee goals for this year, which we discussed this evening. We will talk about the residency data. Will that be in the context of the superintendent's report?
Probably, yeah. We met today to talk about what we have, and we don't have a ton.
Mm-hmm.
We have to we're starting from a baseline
Right.
perspective, but yeah, we can share what we have.
Okay. That will just be a discussion with your report. For subcommittee reports, we'll have finance will have met.
We have policy.
Policy will have met. It sounds like facilities will have updates. And anything else? There are, a couple of other assignments we have. The Student Services Task Force group, the Student Representatives group. I mean, I'm anticipating those things will take a little more time as the school year gets up and running to get underway. So can you, those are the main ones I'm thinking about, but can you just kind of keep me posted really, like what your timeline is going to be when you want to end up putting those on the agendas, and we can do that.
Or bringing students in or something like that.
Yeah. That will be great. Also in the context of the calendar, rebooting of the calendar kind of community engagement process, which may connect with the reconnecting with students. So
Yeah, we should connect.
that won't be at our next meeting per se, but it's then we're going to be into October already. So, all right. Anything else?
Just been looking at Mass General Law, and I think I'm wrong on what I said about school vacancy openings. It's town bylaw. So there's no town bylaw around.
It's a Mass General Law
I think, yeah, both select board
stipulating
and
that.
school
Okay.
committee.
Nevertheless, we'll still double check it.
Just saving the lawyer a little time. Billable hours.
In the clean copy that we review for our next meeting, as we voted, it will be
We'll have gotten to the finish line with this.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We will have, I don't know, we'll have our sashes, like medals, our finisher medals. Okay, I think that's all we have as of now. As always, if other things come up, just let us know. And I think with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? All right, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.